Alright, Black is Black Sheep here. Back with another topic. Today we're going to be talking about metaphysics and how it relates to today's society, what's going on today, worldview, and just an overview on how everything lines up. So, if we go back to where we have Romans, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, right? And so, like, Asia always had more of an empirical worldview. The Romans had more of, or Europeans, Russians, they always had a logical worldview. And African and the Middle East always had a metaphysical worldview. Right? Reason being is because we are metaphysical beings. That's how we was able to achieve longer lasting life, because we put forth effort metaphysically. So, in a metaphysical space, we don't live in a time continuum. We live in this universe is a universe of dimensions, not time and space. Time and space is more logical. So logical means more robotic. Empirical means more animalistic. And metaphysical means exactly where we are, right? To properly explain this, we will have to go back to Egypt and the ancient pyramids and what's written in hieroglyphs on the pyramids. That was their form of language, right? So they say. No, that is the universal form of language. We have, okay. So when you look at a metaphysical world, if you observe it, that automatically put that worldview is prideful. That's what sin is, right? Prideful sin. That's the prideful sin, the worldview. So if logically it does not make sense for a God if you take the logical approach, right? But they don't. If we take the logical approach, then the pyramids would be robotics, But instead, the pyramids are made out of mainly granite, which is a sacred stone, opposed to obsidian being a stone more so for witchcraft, because it will open portals in a witchcraft sense, right? And so you got to look at the pyramids and where they all were. The pyramids was all over the world except for really in Rome and Russia, until Rome eventually got a pyramid. But the problem was, because of their worldview, they didn't put a script inside of their pyramid, right? That was for self-worship. The logical standpoint or viewpoint calls for, just like a computer, right? When you have a hard drive with a computer, you can set that hard drive from slave to master or master to slave, right? So that explains why the United States went through what they went through. It was a battle of worldview. And so only in the logical, it makes sense that way. That's why the math is the way it is, right? 1 times 1 being 1, right? That's a conquest equation. When actually we have to go off of what's in front of us, which is more metaphysical. If one man and one woman make another human being, right? That's 3. So 1 times 1 is 3. in our natural mathematics. That's why in this society over here in the United States, we have so many people who venture off into homosexuality and being transgender because of the worldview. And you can see how it affects the mind of the worldview as well. Now, since we've got so much technology from the observation standpoint, the logical standpoint, we could observe, right? Reason Christ is so important is because he gave a metaphysical gift. And they call it the Holy Spirit, but it's like literal because it sounds so strange, but it's real life. So we really are the center of the universe. We are the beginning of life. Now I can explain, since we have the worldview change here. Now I can explain to you what the hieroglyphs mean and what is it. Right? Hieroglyphs is basically the script of life. As in, the reason why they go and make discoveries and be like, oh, it must be aliens because they had like alien hieroglyphic stuff. No. It's prayers. They build big monuments because they was in the will of God. They build huge monuments. And they wrote prayers on there, right? And because time don't exist, we are in all of the reality, all of the dimension at once. And so we in the dimension of this reality. So if they wrote out how life is going to be, then that's what it's going to be. That's why they have artifacts of airplanes. It's not because they had it's not because they had airplanes back then. It's because they wrote prayers to God to make it so that we go into an era of airplanes and helicopters. And now that we are in the era of flying disc and aliens, right? And that's what they use this world to create those aliens. Those aliens is of this planet, right? And so, boom, when we break down the worldviews, I got the worldviews down to a mathematic. You don't need to have it down to a science. You got to have it down to a mathematic. So you can see, because prophecy also says something about like how the Antichrist will use religion against it or whatever. Put every single religious book in a context of worldview, and you will find which ones was said to be more demonic. Whatever's going to create Babylon again, right? And so if the first Babylon was based on, if it was based on idolatry, it must have came through a logical viewpoint. That's why they had Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar was supposed to have been leading them towards a metaphysical future. So because we know it's a God, everybody announces it's a God. I want y'all to know there is a God. It makes sense. It only makes sense metaphysically. So we can only learn the intelligent, well, really, it's broken down into like wisdom, knowledge, and intellect, right? And so intellect is more logic based. Knowledge is more empirical based. And wisdom is more metaphysical. So, with Christ coming down, giving teachers and making the sacrifice, and how it links up, and how what the keys to why it links up, because you have the Ankh and you have the cross, right? a famous line that Jesus says is, he is the Alpha and the Omega, right? The Alpha is the beginning. So in the beginning of time, this is the same God in Alpha that helped them, right? Also, projections of the stars. The reason why the pyramids are perfectly aligned to where the stars are in the rotation of the universe, reason being, is because we wrote the script for it. And only God can create that. Makes sense? Only God can create a planet. He made this one. So they made planets. They mapped out the stars. They gave it to God as a prayer. Therefore, they was within his will. They made a mistake that was going to ruin history, in the direction of history. And so he wiped it all out. And so when he wiped out everything as far as civilization goes, he left the pyramids. So he left everything he created. They had a connection with God so tough that through divine help, he helped them build those pyramids. That's why you can't make it make sense on a logical standpoint. Because we don't live in a logic-based reality. We're not logic-based. Or else I would be a robot. Literally. I would be a robot. And that's how everybody act. It's more robotic. It's more 1 times 1 is not, that defeats the purpose of multiplication. 1 times 1 equals 1. That's obviously where sin comes from. Everything about sin is everything that Lucifer was in heaven. So if Lucifer and the first sin was pride. With pride being the first with pride being the first sin and logic being a prideful worldview, that's why it's not working. God is not answering prayers over here, which goes into LA. Right? Because God also said we got to follow the fruit of the enemy. Right? And so when you look at the worldview, you can look at the fruit. We have the Torah. That's a logical worldview religious text. The Old Testament is logic-based. The Islamic, the Quran is logic-based. The New Testament is metaphysical-based. And the technology they used towards metaphysically, or the wisdom that they had with the divine, that's how they was able to create the Nephilim. Sleeping with the angels. They broke the veil to where these demons were. They was able to see these demons, right? And these fallen angels and they was able to see because their wisdom was strong. They had very strong wisdom. And so that's why God had to reset the world the first time. He had to wash it all out to remix up the gene pool. But still, you had the worldview of logic as the problem. That's the root of Satan. That worldview is what got into Satan's heart. It's like looking at oneself. He just looked at himself and found, and that's the mathematical equation of it. Logic-based thinking. We're not logic-based. And so just so happened, when everybody take on the logic-based worldview, naturally we do not like the things. According to your worldview, naturally we're not going to like the things that's supposed to realign us. That's why the other day I mentioned something about marijuana being illegal and the reason why. Because marijuana gives you melatonin. Melatonin feeds your pineal gland. The pineal gland is the eye of Horus. That's how they was able to see. But you can't see it in if you are in a logical based society, in order to drive home your point, you have to take out everything spiritual, right? I believe the witchcraft that they said was witchcraft wasn't witchcraft. It was the proper knowledge. It was the proper direction that we needed to go through. We're supposed to be a metaphysical based society. That's why we have diseases. This is why the diseases come up, because when we live in a logical worldview, it's going to produce everything that's supposed to be good for a car, right? Something like a robot. That's why, Elon Musk can thrive in this society. You can just build robots, and the robots will outlast the humans. Actually, they'll overthrow us because they're built for this environment. They're built for a logic-based, society. So we need to change the worldview. And that's going to be the toughest thing yet, because that's what Jesus was trying to do. He was trying to change everyone's worldview. Then they realized, oh, snap, he was correct. And he was God. The world, everything started shaking. Curtains from the temple ripping off. You know how much power that is? But you can't compute. Logically, you wouldn't be able to compute that. But you're also not a robot. So you're not going to be required to compute that. 1 times 1 is 3. That's the problem with Einstein. I'm glad they told me he was autistic. He got autism through the worldview. He made himself autistic. Yeah. And briefly, we'll go back to LA. Reason I said something about LA is because the logic-based worldview shows similar fruit as well. Nero and Caesar was burning down cities, right? If they was burning down cities using a logic viewpoint, then you got to imagine if we're in a society that's outside of God's will, because everybody's thought process is on pride, that wasn't divine at all, what happened in LA. That was not God's judgment at all. That was a callous leader who don't know how to take an L. That's what that was. That was a psychopath, or someone who is, because it's not good to label people things in a metaphysical mindset, right? Because it's not the people, the vessels, it's not their faults, right? It's a demon that's possessing them. And it's all about the worldview. You shift the worldview, and the only real way you can do it is through religion. And you got to do it through the New Testament, so you can actually get the metaphysical gift to understand the illusion of the United States and other countries. Other countries suffer from this too, right? But yeah, Nero and Caesar in a logic worldview society, they burnt down their own cities, and that's basically what happened again. Except for this is a thing of conquest. It's more of a sore loser type thing. I ain't even gonna mention who I feel like burned it down, but it's obvious. It should be obvious on who's helping who in order to burn it down and why they burned it down. You know what I'm saying? And so we have that. Now Cleopatra and how she was kind of I know people were saying that she's the worst. She was actually on a route to cleansing the world. Now, if they was all going through a logical standpoint, because even in a logic society, they believe men are logical creatures, when we're not. We're not logical creatures. We don't work that way for real. But Caesar was the king of the Romans. He was the top dog. He was basically the Drake of Rome. He was the Drake of Rome. And then someone like Cleopatra, she introduced love to him. That's why love started so many wars. Because love actually comes from metaphysical. It's a metaphysical trait. You can't resonate with love in a logical mindset. And so, because Cleopatra was more spiritual, she cleansed his heart. And I guarantee the reason why Brutus and all of them turned on Caesar is because they saw the change in him. And he was probably, they took it like, oh, you getting soft at heart. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're supposed to rule with an iron fist. But he already experienced love, and so they killed him. And then Cleopatra moved to Mark Antony. Cleopatra spoke 9 languages. And a logical worldview, people gotta like observe language for forever in order to learn 9 languages. That's gonna take forever, logically. But in a metaphysical worldview, you can learn 9 languages as a gift from God. God can just give you that gift of 9 languages. The Rosetta Stone wasn't a manuscript that was like written by a Greek, a Latin, and an Egyptian. The first people wrote it 3 different languages, and it developed as it stood. That's what the Rosetta Stone is. All of that stuff is script, just like how we, on a logic base, on how we create these apps and everything else, even movies and shows and stuff like that. It's all based on script. And so even with a comic book, like it don't really exist in a time. You know? The reason why certain stones was considered witchcraft because they were opening up actual portals. There's videos all over YouTube about that. I'm so sorry, Bubba. What's going on? What's up? Y'all want to come out? Let me move this. Y'all don't want to watch Jonah no more. So metaphysically, I don't even know where I was at. Excuse me, little man. Oh, it's all over the internet on how people can open portals and dimensions. Well, the reason we can't space travel is because we're not robotic. And I know we would like to create a time-space continuum, but the reason we can't is because it's not metaphysical. It's outside of our realm. If we was a robot, we could create that. But we're not robots. Unless we're gonna just like expose to the world that the worldview is the reason why. We just using technology to advance us in a metaphysical way. But no, I believe we could have a lot more abilities. We can do a lot more and change the world differently. They created Mars. They created Jupiter. They created all of those planets, right? And the Mandela effect makes sense in a dimensional world, right? Because if someone vandalize or mess up that script from Egypt, then it'll create a rift in the dimension. It'll create a whole rift in the dimension. And so, yeah, if I just went and like completely defile something within the pyramid, I can mess up the direction of where history is going to go. But it's already written. It was already written That's the puzzle. It was already written. It's written on the pyramids. Everything is coming to life. That's why we see these flying saucers now. They're not aliens. They were created by the Egyptians.